Here. This is warm-up for the reporter of the day. And we have Mr. Iverson for defense and Mr. Bach for the plaintiff. I am Mr. Bach, B-A-C-H.
And I am the witness. And do I have a name?
I think your name is Mr. Moss. I don't think there's ever a first name given. Oh, here comes somebody. Diana. We're just going to start some warm-up. And
I am Mr. Iverson representing the defendant, and that's I-V-E-R-S-O-N.
okay, note that your first timing mark is, oh, never mind, that's for the thing. Never mind. Well, again, your first timing mark here is
Line 14.
Line 14, and I can't set my watch with the computer mouse, which is what I grabbed.
That's a good one. It's close.
That's not going to do anything. Okay, all right, so here we go. This warm-up will be at 1:50.
So are you putting it the warm up on the?
Yes.
Okay.
I am. All right.
This begins with a question by Mr. Iverson. For the record, how long, if you had, prior to July 30, 2013, when you were suspended from the Highway Patrol, had you known Mr. and Mrs. Marks?
Well, I went to work as a caretaker there. Just what date that was, I really don't recall. But it was approximately 6 months prior to that.
Okay, at the time of your suspension from the Highway Patrol on July 30, 2013, where were you living?
We were still caretaking for them.
In Palermo?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any written agreement with them with respect to your living on the ranch?
Yes, we did.
What was your written agreement with them?
I don't know. The contract is about 7 or 8 pages, and I don't remember what's in it.
What was the substance of the agreement? Were you to do something for them?
Yes, I was to work a certain number of hours per week. I was to perform duties specified in the contract or whatever else Mr. and Mrs. Marks wanted me to do other than that.
So the contract spelled out your duties?
Yes, it did.
Were there duties that you were to perform that were not spelled out in the contract?
Yes, there were.
Like what?
Well, work cattle, fix fences. I did anything they wanted me to do or anything needing to be done.
Were you to receive any form of compensation or some payment in return for what you were to do for them?
Yes, sir.
Like what?
$200 a month plus the house and utilities were paid.
By the Marks?
Yes, sir.
So they provided you with a place to live?
Yes, sir, they did.
They paid all utilities in conjunction with your living accommodations, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Plus, they gave you $200 a month on top of that. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you were married at the time, weren't you?
Yes, sir, I was.
So you and your wife resided then on their property from when to when?
I don't remember when we moved on there.
Do you remember when you left the property?
The first part of August, I believe.
Don't guess, Ted.
I'm trying hard to remember.
Would it be correct that you left their property within a week or 10 days after you were suspended from the Highway Patrol in that time frame?
Yes.
By the way, Mr. Moss, do you consider yourself physically fit to be a Highway Patrol officer today?
Yes, there's nothing wrong with me.
From a physical standpoint, you feel in your own mind you are qualified to be a highway patrol officer?
Yes, sir, I certainly do.
Why did you quit living on the Palermo property?
It assumes facts, not in evidence, that he quit. He may have been chased off legally or illegally. That also calls for him to interpret the word quit, and I don't want him to interpret anything. I want him to answer the question if he understands it.
Do you understand the word quit?
Leave, yes.
All right. Why did you leave?
I left the property because Mr. and Mrs. Marks served legal papers on me for eviction from the property.
And that's why you left?
Well, that and the fact that I no longer wished to work for a man that accused me of theft.
What theft has he accused you of?
Petty theft.
How did you know at that point in time he had accused you of petty theft?
Well, he had made accusations. My wife and I had heard about them. There was nothing in writing, though, but we weren't getting along, obviously.
So it is your testimony that at the time you left the Palermo property, whenever that was, after July 30, 2013, it was your understanding that Mr. and Mrs. Marks had accused you of petty theft. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
From whom did you learn that?
Well, the highway patrol was on the property off and on during that period of time. Obviously, they weren't there just to look at the flowers. I merely put things together in my own mind. Howard had made accusations and it trickled back to us. I don't know how they heard about it, but there were neighbors around there we talked to. I don't remember everything they said.
Are you saying, Mr. Moss, that you learned prior to leaving the property that Mr. and Mrs. Marks had changed or accused you of petty theft?
Yes, sir, that is right.
As you sit there right now, do you have a recollection of the person or persons who informed you of that?
No, sir.
Do you have any personal notes, ledgers, logs, memorandums, anything at all in writing, wherein you wrote down the name of any person or persons who informed you of the allegations made by the Marks prior to your leaving the property?
No, I don't believe so.
And so there is nothing in writing that you are aware of that would refresh your recollection as to who told you of the allegations made by anyone against you with respect to petty theft.
That is correct.
At any point in time after you left the property, did anybody inform you that the Marks had charged you with petty theft other than with respect to the criminal complaint filed against you?
No, sir.
Did Howard Marks face-to-face accuse you of stealing any of his property at any time?
No, sir, he did not.
Did Marilyn Marks at any time face-to-face accuse you of stealing any of her property?
No, sir, she did not.
To your recollection, as you sit there right now, Mr. Moss, from whom did you first learn of allegations against you of petty theft by Mr. and Mrs. Marks?
I received something in the mail. It was an official notice to appear at the Oroville Justice Court.
So your first notice was some form of a criminal citation?
Yes, it was. I think it was a certified type letter.
Prior to that time, were you aware of the allegations by Mr. and Mrs. Marks of petty theft?
No, sir.
Had you heard any rumors from anybody about criminal charges against you of petty theft by Mr. and Mrs. Marks prior to receipt in the mail of this criminal citation from the Oroville Justice Court?
There was a rumor, but I don't recall. As I said earlier, I don't recall where or how I heard it. There was a rumor, though.
Did it come from your wife?
It may have. I don't recall.
At any point in time after July 30th, 2013, have you discussed with your wife any knowledge she had of allegations or charges against you of petty theft by Mr. and Mrs. Marks?
Well, we've discussed it.
What has she told you she had heard or learned with respect to those allegations of petty theft against you by Howard and Marilyn Marks?
I don't recall now.
You don't recall at all?
He said he doesn't recall, so let's move on, counsel.
All right. Is it your understanding that had the criminal allegations of petty theft against you by Mr. and Mrs. Marks not been filed, you would still be with the Highway Patrol?
I believe so, yes.
To your understanding was, strike that. What was the disposition of the criminal charges brought against you?
Mr. and Mrs. Marks failed to testify, so they dropped the charges.
Were there 2 criminal complaints brought against you?
I don't recall now. I'm not sure.
Did the criminal complaints involve the same criminal charges?
I believe so, yes.
Were both criminal complaints dismissed, as far as you know, prior to your termination with the Highway Patrol?
Yes, sir.
It may sound like an obvious question, Mr. Moss, but I take it that you deny at any time having committed theft against any property of Mr. and Mrs. Marks.
That is correct.
How would you describe your personal relationship with Mr. and Mrs. Marks as of July 30, 2013?
Well, I didn't want anything to do with the man. He was obviously fabricating stories to incriminate me for whatever reason, and I didn't want anything to do with him.
What stories was he fabricating?
The theft, of course.
What else?
Everything you told Bill Sands.
Well, let's get the everything out on the table, Mr. Moss.
I don't recall, Mr. Iverson, exactly what all these charges were. If you want to refresh my memory, I'll be happy to discuss them. I don't recall.
At this stage, I'll state for the record, you have numerous volumes of transcripts from the State Personnel Board in your possession, counsel. You have all of the diaries of Mrs. Moss that spell out in detail what Mr. Marks' accusations are, so you are not without knowledge of what they are. If you want to show him those and see if they refresh his memory, you are more than welcome. All right, so that was our, Reporter of the Day warm-up. Okay. We will now do the Reporter of the Day. Oh.
Do you want this?
So we're ready for the Reporter of the Day segment. We will announce appearances. I am Mr. Bach for the plaintiff.
And I am the witness, Mr. Moss.
And I am Mr. Iverson representing the defendant.
Will you please, yeah.
Yeah. Would you please raise your right hand? And do I have to raise my hand too, or? Okay,
Mrs. Douglas,
said yes.
said yes, so we'll go with that.
Do you solemnly state under penalty of perjury that the evidence that you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, for the record. The nature of the criminal charges was petty theft.
Yes, sir.
Any other form of criminal charge other than petty theft?
I believe that was all.
Petty theft from whom?
Howard Marks.
What about Marilyn Marks?
Howard and Marilyn Marks.
When you were told by Lieutenant Nelson that you were being suspended and he handed you this document, is it your recollection that the document only referenced suspension because of pending criminal charges against you involving petty theft?
It just said criminal charges. It did not indicate petty theft.
When did you learn that petty theft was involved in the criminal charges?
30 to 60 days later.
Okay, this is a formal notice of suspension in writing that you received in this 30 to 60 day period. Is that what you are saying?
The formal notice was the day of July 30th.
Okay, it was a 30 to 60-day period later that you received the actual allegations or charges against you?
There was allegations of petty theft. It did not, however, indicate at that time exactly what they were, who they supposedly occurred upon, this kind of thing.
When did you learn for the first time that the criminal charges involved petty theft from Howard and Marilyn Marks?
I think I received a notice in the mail from the Butte County Justice Court ordering me to appear on such and such a date for petty theft charges.
Is it your position, Mr. Moss, that the only reason you were terminated from the Highway Patrol was because of the petty theft charges involving Howard and Marilyn Marks?
No, I think there were other reasons, but that was a basis for the majority of it.
What other reasons?
It was the allegations made by Mr. and Mrs. Marks, but they were many other accusations. I don't recall what they were.
Well, you agree that there were other reasons for your termination from the Highway Patrol other than the petty theft charges charged against you by Mr. and Mrs. Marks?
Yes, sir.
My question is, what other allegations or charges were there with respect to the termination of your employment with the California Highway Patrol?
Wait a minute. You just answered you didn't know. Don't answer it again. Please read back the previous 2 questions and he'll hear his answer. Would you please do that?
Okay. Would you agree that there were other reasons for your termination from the one before that?
2 previous, yeah.
So I have what other reasons? Do you want the answers as well?
Yes, please.
Answer, it was the allegations made by Mr. and Mrs. Marks that there were many other accusations. I don't recall what they were. And then question, will you agree that there were other reasons for your termination from the Highway Patrol other than the petty theft charges charged against you by Mr. and Mrs. Marks? Answer, yes, sir.
My objection still stands. He has answered the question. Why don't you rephrase it?
Okay. As you sit there right now, is it your testimony you cannot recall any of the other charges or allegations against you with respect to your termination from the Highway Patrol other than the petty theft charges involving Mr. and Mrs. Marks?
That is correct.
You are more than welcome to show him any documents to refresh his memory, counsel.
That's his job, not mine.
It is not his job to bring documents. He is not under a subpoena ducis tecum. He has prepared for his deposition, okay? He has prepared by memory. He will be ready for trial. I can tell you that.
Okay, is it your understanding that the only reason you were terminated was because of the substantiation of the petty theft charges?
There were other reasons. I just do not recall them.
Okay, so it is your understanding then, as you sit there, the ultimate termination in December of 2013 was based on several allegations, one of which was petty theft.
That's correct.
Who was it that signed the criminal complaint?
Objection. Which criminal complaint? I object to the question as being vague.
The petty theft one he referred to.
Objection. Which petty theft? There were more than one.
The first one.
I don't recall who signed it.
Who signed the second petty theft complaint?
I don't recall.
Do you know if Howard Marks signed it?
I don't think that he did.
Marilyn Marks?
It was a law enforcement officer that signed it. I don't know the officer's name.
Was it William T. Sands?
It could have been. I don't recall.
Was it Officer Mills?
I said I don't know which one signed it.
But it's your understanding neither Howard nor Marilyn Marks signed the complaint?
To the best of my knowledge, they did not.
You would agree that at the time the criminal action was brought against you, Mr. and Mrs. Marks were not employed by the California Highway Patrol or the County of Butte?
That's correct.
May I have that last question read back, please?
So question, you would agree that at the time the criminal objection or criminal was brought against you, Mr. and Mrs. Marks were not employed by the California Highway Patrol or the County of Butte.
Thank you. Now we will have warm-up that will be from the 140 take material. We have Mr. Carlson's for defense and Mr. Feder for the plaintiff. I am Mr. Feder for the plaintiff.
I am the witness.
I am Mr. Carlson's representing the defendant.
Okay, so let's read in 18s until there's a couple pages and then it goes to 17s.
So we're going to 17s then.
Yeah, when it says in the side margin.
Just follow the margins.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start at the top of the page here.
Okay, begins with a question by Mr. Carlson's for the record. Is there some reason that you do not wear seat belts or seat restraints?
Are you referring to prior to the accident?
At any time.
Is there any reason why?
Right.
There's no particular reason, but I am just comfortable without using it.
It's not convenient.
It's not convenient.
Other than the fact it's not convenient, is there any other reason that you have never used a seat restraint system?
No other reason.
Have you ever read anything that has advised you that the use of a seatbelt is important in terms of safety in the event of an accident?
I didn't pay much attention before the accident, but after the accident, now I know how important it is.
Have you changed your habit with respect to the use of seatbelt restraint systems?
I would like to interpose an objection on the ground it's irrelevant, immaterial, and any subsequent changes are not relevant.
What was the question again?
Have you changed your habit with regard to not using seat restraint systems after the accident?
Same objection.
Yes, I have changed that.
What is your habit today?
I use the seat belt.
Do you also have your daughter now use the seat belt when riding in a car?
Yes.
And what is there about the accident that changed your view on the use of seat belts?
I am going to interpose an objection on the grounds of relevancy that any subsequent conduct is immaterial.
Counsel, just so we don't keep going through this, we have got enough delay in this deposition. I think you already have under the code a standing reservation of all objections, except as to form. It would appear unnecessary. If you don't want to abide by that, fine. If you want to make objections on everything, I will withdraw from any stipulation and insist you make all objections no matter what, so as to preserve them. Do you wish to stay with the code procedure, or do you want to adopt something new?
I will stick with the code, but I will make the objections where I see fit.
If you are going to make objections to anything other than to the form, then I state for the record that I will object to any reservation of objections and that all objections are to be made to this deposition. And I do not agree or stipulate to the reservation of any objections, since the intent of the code is to avoid actually what is happening here. If that is not going to be followed, then I will not give you the benefit of reserving objections.
It was my understanding all objections were preserved except as to form, but I wanted to get my objections on the record.
I think you are making objections to relevancy, which are not objections to form, at least the way I studied the procedures. And if we are going to delay the procedure because of objections on relevancy, then I will insist you make all of them. I am not going to have you piecemeal decide when you are going to object or not object.
Fine, go ahead.
Now, with respect to seatbelts, I am sorry. I don't believe I got an answer to the question on what it was about the accident that has resulted in your change of habit and use of seatbelts.
Both. If Danny and me used a seatbelt, we didn't come out of the car at the scene of the accident.
Would not have come out of the car? Is that what you are saying?
Would not.
In other words, you understand now that if the seat belt system available in the car had been used, neither you nor your son would have fallen out of the car. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, before the accident, did you ever take a driver's education course?
You mean the driving school?
Let's start with that. Did you ever go to a driving school?
I studied the driving instruction, California driving booklet.
California traffic law?
The little brochure you get in order to get your license, you studied that?
Yes, right.
Have you read that every time you have had to have your driver's license renewed?
Yes.
All right, and incidentally, do you have a valid California driver's license today?
Yes.
Could I see that, please? For the record, the witness has produced a California driver's license number G4727551, indicating no restrictions, indicating also this is a duplicate with an expiration date on birthday 1994. With respect to your driving license, have you ever had the license suspended or revoked for any reason?
No.
When you took the driving test, did you take it actually in the English language?
Yes.
And did you pass the written test each time that you took it?
Yes.
Did you read in the manual that is provided by the Department of Motor Vehicles anything at all about the purposes and functions of seatbelt and seat restraint systems in automobiles?
Maybe. I don't know.
Did you at any time hear before you had the accident in January of 1992 that seat belts in fact are intended to serve a safety purpose in automobile collisions?
I think you are explaining or giving her information that I don't think is part of the question.
What is a question? I didn't understand you.
Did you at any time hear before you had the accident in January of 1992 that seat belts in fact are intended to serve a safety purpose in automobile collisions?
No, I didn't know.
Did you ever attend a driving school of any sort?
After the accident, the teacher came to my house.
How did you happen to get a teacher after the accident?
The instructor came to my house because I was handicapped, and he wanted to know whether I was able to drive or not.
Then did you discuss with him anything about driving procedures as relates to seatbelts?
I don't remember.
Did you ever attend any court-ordered instruction because of a moving violation or traffic ticket that you had received?
You mean the school? Went to school?
Right.
No.
You have received driving violations for moving offenses in the past, have you not?
Yes.
Did you just always pay the fine?
Yes.
When you first got your license in the United States, Did you take any type of a driving course?
No,
When you read the VW owner's manual, did you read the section about the seatbelt?
I don't know.
Now, in fact, when you bought your car brand new, it had a system where the car couldn't be started unless the seatbelt was attached. Isn't that correct?
I don't remember.
Did you remember that you had a time when a buzzer would sound unless the seatbelt was on?
No sound.
Did your husband and you ever discuss having the system disconnected that would relate to using a seatbelt before you could start the car?
No,
When you came to the United States, under what visa or procedures did you come?
immigration visa.
Did you have a green card?
Yes,
You are on a permanent resident status?
yes,
And did your husband also have a green card?
yes,
Did you have a special occupation that you or your husband were applying for in order to get a green card in the United States at that time?
yes.
What was that special status?
Nursing.
Did you have a driver's license in Korea?
No,
So you learned to drive here?
yes.
Who taught you how to drive?
My husband's best friend,
And what type of a car did he teach you?
Pontiac.
What is the husband's best friend's name who taught you how to drive?
John King.
What is the last name?
King. K-A-N-G.